hunt was underway. A serial killer was at large in Chicago. 22 young men had been brutally killed. Detectives from Lake County, Illinois. They'd been on the case for months. The cops were under pressure to make an arrest before the killer struck again.
Look at your marks here. Then you hit Herrera with his hand cut off, and you had ligature marks on the other hand.
Their persistence and skill finally proved successful. The suspect was apprehended along with a mass of incriminating evidence. They felt they'd finally caught their killer. But in court, the police were stunned. Defense attorneys argued that the evidence should be excluded because the police had gathered it illegally, and that this man, a suspected serial killer, must go free. The police felt they'd done everything they could. Their evidence was overwhelming. They had a knife with blood traces, matching tire tracks, boot prints. With so much evidence against him, how could a man suspected of 22 murders be released back onto our streets? The chain of events began in 1982. 1 year later, 22 young men were dead. Dan Collin was the lead detective. Night after night, the investigation concentrated on Chicago's north side, where many of the victims had lived.
Does anybody look familiar, either in the neighborhood or in the...
Look at these pictures, see if you ever seen this guy in the neighborhood. Maybe you know him.
Detective Collin, the Lake County Sheriff's Police, are investigating a series of murders that occurred in our jurisdiction. Several murders, and I'm wondering if you take a look at some photos and see if you can identify anything.
Police frustration mounted. No one seemed to know anything. No leads. No clues.
Nothing. Oh, how about you?
No, nothing.
Meanwhile, the murders continued, all seemingly committed by the same man.
The victims were male, generally ages 14 to 28. Muscular build, generally. Most of them were all street people. A lot of them were homosexual. The crime scenes were all open areas. Most of the bodies were covered up in some form, either by twigs or the body was hidden in some way. Most of the victims were found after a period of time, so therefore the physical evidence was minimal.
There were similarities in the way all these men were slain. The location of the stab wounds, the marks on their wrists, but nothing led the police to a suspect. Then they received their first major breakthrough. An anonymous caller gave them the name of a suspect, house painter Larry Eiler.
Larry Eiler was a dual personality.
The Lake County Sheriff was Robert Babcock.
When we were investigating him during the murders, we found a macho, beer-drinking individual that when he went out to kill would change completely. He would wear a fatigue cap, put on a Marine fatigue jacket, combat boots, and become a different personality. He used the uptown area, the gay community in Chicago, as a private hunting preserve to locate his victims, to satisfy his sadistic pleasures in killing.
August 31st, 1983. Another brutal slaying in the same series of murders. The victim, 28-year-old Ralph Calise. Ralph Calise's body was discovered soon after his death. The physical evidence was still fresh. At last, the police saw hope of cracking their case.
The case with Ralph Calise was the only case out of all the 23 that had physical evidence. It had rained the night before, and there was tire marks that we had found. There was also footprint impressions, there was a boot print, and a shoe impression. The footprint was a sack impression that we photographed. The boot impression we took a cast of, and the shoe impression matched that of Ralph Calise.
Dan Collin and his team knew that if they could link someone to the footprints and tire tracks, they would have their murderer. Early one morning, about 1 month later, the police got their second major breakthrough. An Indiana Highway Patrol car spotted an illegally parked pickup truck. The state trooper decided to investigate.
The police officer stopped, asked them what they were doing. They said that they had to relieve themselves. He says, "What's in the paper bags?" They said, "Toilet paper." He said, "Let me see." They opened the bags. There was rope.
Step out of your truck and escort me back to my vehicle.
The two men had been caught in a lie. The trooper became suspicious. He checked the driver's identification and radioed his name into the station house. The driver's name was Larry Eiler.
The dispatcher told them that Eiler was a suspect in as many as 23 murders, and the gay task force was looking to question him.
Step back and spread your legs, please.
Larry Eiler was carefully searched. He was then handcuffed and read the Miranda warnings of his rights.
Mr. Eiler, you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand that right? Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
Larry Eiler was taken into custody and held for 12 hours. While in custody, he gave his consent for the police to search his truck. Meanwhile, the detectives from Lake County were rushing down to Indiana with the evidence they had gathered at the site of Ralph Calise's murder.
They showed us what they had retrieved from Larry's truck. They retrieved a pair of boots, which matched the photographs that we had brought up from Lake County. They had a knife. They had the inked impressions from Larry's truck. The FBI lab positively identified that boot as coming from Larry Eiler's boot. They positively identified blood that had been found inside of the boot, which is indicative of the fact that Larry was wearing sacks. And at the crime scene, I indicated that we had found sack impressions and then stuck his foot back into his boot after having stepped in blood. They identified that blood as coming from Ralph Calise.
The police were convinced they'd finally caught their killer.
We know that he killed Calise. I have every reason in the world to believe that he killed as many as 23 other people.
The evidence the police had amassed was overwhelming. The tire tracks matched. The footprints matched. Larry Eiler seemed certain to be convicted. But once in court, a problem arose. Eiler's attorney, David Shippers.
At the point they took him into Lowell and put him in a cell, they effected an arrest, a seizure of his person. That seizure was without any probable cause whatsoever. There were no charges pending. It turned out that the state police down in Indianapolis hadn't even asked that he be stopped. They only wanted information as to stops when he was stopped on a traffic charge. Consequently, when they placed him in a cell and seized his boots and other material, at that stage, the arrest became illegal.
The judge agreed. Larry Eiler, a suspect in 23 homicides, could not be convicted. The judge decided the police had arrested Eiler illegally, so all the evidence obtained when they searched his truck could not be used in court.
Let me tell you what it was that made the arrest bad. When Larry Eiler was originally stopped by the policeman, the Lowell state policeman on the side of the road, it was a valid traffic stop. The policeman was well within his rights, and there were no violations of constitutional rights when he pulled Larry Eiler over. There's a distinct difference between a legitimate stop for the purpose of investigation, mere investigation, and a full-blown arrest. In Larry Eiler's case, that point was reached when the police removed him from his car, put handcuffs on him, and took him into custody. At that point, the courts found there was a seizure of his person, an arrest, if you will. At that point, probable cause was required, and when the court found that there was no probable cause, the evidence that came thereafter was excluded under the exclusionary rule.
The exclusionary rule is a rule of law which guarantees that for evidence to stand up in court, it must be obtained within the boundaries of the law. It's a rule which many people believe lets the guilty go free.
Where's justice? What happens to justice? What about the truth of the matter? Doesn't that count in our courts? Don't we care whether he's a killer, whether he killed somebody and may kill again, or are we just interested, did the Indiana State Police officer have grounds to check him?
Sheriff Babcock's men watched helplessly. They were convinced Larry Eiler was guilty. They believed that he had cheated justice.
My attitude when Larry Eiler walked out was obviously heartbreak. We had put months on the investigation. We'd put up a good case on it to see it fall apart. But my opinion was that it would be a matter of time and he would kill again. There was no question in my mind. I stated within 6 months he'd be killing again. I was right.
Larry Eiler returned to Chicago's North Side, a district where many of the serial murder victims had lived. It was there that he met 16-year-old Danny Bridges.
He just asked me, Mom, can I go out on the back and get some air? So I told him, sure, go ahead.
Danny's mother, Austine Bridges.
So that's where I figured he was until he was out there for quite a little while and then come back in.
I see him when he went out the back door. And that was the last time I saw him.
That was the last time any of us seen him.
Danny hadn't been seen for 2 days when his family heard the news.
Larry Eiler killed Danny Bridges in the apartment that he lived. He did not dump the body like he did other times. He did not cover it up. What he did was he literally cut Danny Bridges up into 8 pieces, bagged him, and then threw him in a dumpster in an alleyway in Chicago.
My first comment to my wife was, my God, did I do that?
In Danny Bridges' murder, the evidence conclusively linked Eiler with the crime. Larry Eiler was found guilty of first-degree murder. He awaits execution on Illinois' death row.
They shouldn't have let him go, because if they wouldn't have let him go, my brother wouldn't be dead. He'd still be alive. I didn't think it was wrong.